The suburban sprawl of Maplewood, New Jersey, stretched out in neat rows of manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses. But for Emily Harper, 29, life inside her in-law's colonial-style home was anything but picturesque. The air was thick with tension, the kind that hums like a live wire, ready to spark at the slightest touch. Emily's story wasn't just about a marriage gone sour, it was about survival, betrayal, and a quiet rebellion brewing under the surface of a seemingly perfect American family. From the moment she stepped into the Harper household, she knew she was walking into a battlefield, one where her every move was scrutinized, her every contribution dismissed. 5 years ago, Emily married Ethan Harper, a charming but spineless sales manager who thrived on pleasing everyone but his wife. Their early years were blissful, date nights at cozy Italian restaurants, weekend hikes in the Appalachians, and dreams of a future filled with kids and a white picket fence. But that dream shattered when Ethan's father, George, was diagnosed with a chronic illness that demanded round-the-clock care. As the only child, Ethan insisted they move into his parents' sprawling Maplewood home to help. Emily, a graphic designer who'd built a steady freelance career, hesitated. She valued her independence, her quiet apartment, her routine, but love, and Ethan's tearful pleas, won out. She agreed, thinking it would be temporary. She was wrong. The Harper household was ruled by Margaret, Ethan's mother, a woman whose sharp tongue and sharper judgments could cut through steel. From day one, Margaret treated Emily like an intruder, a freeloader who'd somehow conned her way into the family. Emily, the dishes aren't going to wash themselves, Margaret would snap, her voice dripping with disdain as Emily sat at her laptop, designing logos for clients across the country. All you do is fiddle with that computer. You call that work? To Margaret, Emily's remote job was a hobby, a distraction from her real duties as a wife and daughter-in-law. Never mind that Emily was pulling in $5,200 a month, more than Ethan's inconsistent commissions, while juggling laundry, cooking, and tending to George's medical needs. Ethan wasn't much better, a classic people pleaser. He burned through their joint account treating his co-workers to steak dinners at Ruth's Chris and rounds of craft beer at trendy bars in Hoboken. He'd come home reeking of bourbon, bragging about how he'd kept the team happy. Meanwhile, Margaret's idea of financial responsibility was signing up for pottery classes, wine tasting weekends, and lavish shopping sprees at Nordstrom with her book club friends. Emily watched her savings dwindle, her dreams of a down payment on a house slipping further away. She'd confront Ethan, her voice steady but firm. "We're bleeding money. Ethan, you and your mom need to cut back." His response was always the same, a defensive shrug, a mumbled excuse about maintaining relationships at work. Margaret was worse, dismissing Emily's concerns with a wave of her manicured hand. "You're just a glorified typist. Dear, don't lecture us on money." The only light in this suffocating house was George, Ethan's father, bedridden but sharp as ever. George saw Emily for who she was, a lifeline keeping the family afloat. While Margaret was off sipping rosé and Ethan was buying rounds for his colleagues, Emily was the one adjusting George's pillows, administering his meds, and listening to his stories about his days as a high school history teacher. "You're a godsend, Emily," he'd say, his voice weak but warm. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Unlike the others, George knew the truth. Emily's income was the backbone of the household. Ethan's erratic earnings couldn't cover the mortgage, let alone Margaret's extravagance. George's gratitude was a balm for Emily's frayed nerves, but it wasn't enough to silence the growing resentment in her heart. The tension came to a head one evening when Emily, exhausted from a 12-hour workday, found a $1,200 charge on their credit card for a team-building golf outing Ethan had funded. She confronted him in the kitchen, her voice low to avoid waking George. "Ethan, we can't keep living like this. You're spending money we don't have." Ethan's face reddened, his usual charm replaced by indignation. "I'm not going to look cheap in front of my team. You wouldn't get it. You just sit at home all day." Margaret, eavesdropping from the living room, chimed in. "She's right. Ethan, you need to keep up appearances." And Emily, Stop pretending you're contributing anything real. You're lucky we let you stay here. The words hit like a slap. Emily was stunned, not just by their cruelty but by their delusion. She wasn't just contributing, she was carrying them. Her salary paid for the groceries, the utilities, the medical bills. She'd taken on the bulk of George's care, freeing Margaret to flit about with her friends. Yet, to them, she was invisible, a freeloader who dared to question their lifestyle. That night, as she lay awake next to a snoring Ethan, Emily made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this. But leaving wasn't simple. George needed her, and she loved him like the father she'd lost years ago. For his sake, she'd stay, for now. Emily's days became a grind of survival. She'd wake at dawn, answer client emails, prepare George's breakfast, and scrub the kitchen while Margaret criticized her technique. She'd steal moments to work on her designs, only to be interrupted by Margaret's demands or Ethan's complaints about her attitude. But George's quiet encouragement kept her going. One afternoon, as she adjusted his IV, he grabbed her hand. Emily, I see what you're doing for us. I know it's you holding this family together. I'm so sorry it's come to this. His eyes, clouded with illness, held a clarity that pierced her. He knew, he understood, and in that moment, Emily felt a spark of hope. A plan was forming, one that would change everything. The air in Maplewood, New Jersey, carried a chill that matched the cold reality settling over the Harper household. Emily Harper, now 29, had walked away from her in-laws' colonial home, leaving behind a marriage that had suffocated her and a family that had bled her dry. The moment she stepped out, divorce papers signed and her belongings packed into a rented U-Haul. She felt a weight lift. But for Ethan Harper and his mother, Margaret, the absence of Emily's steady income was about to unravel their carefully curated suburban facade. This wasn't just a story of a woman breaking free. It was a tale of consequences catching up to those who'd taken her for granted. And a testament to the quiet strength of a plan set in motion by a dying man's gratitude. Emily's departure was like pulling the plug on a sinking ship. Ethan, the charming but reckless sales manager, and Margaret, the self-indulgent matriarch, had relied on Emily's $5,200 monthly freelance income to fund their extravagant lifestyle. Ethan's habit of playing the big shot, dropping hundreds on steak dinners at the Capitol Grill and bar tabs at trendy Hoboken spots, had never been sustainable on his erratic commissions. Margaret, meanwhile, treated her inheritance like a personal ATM, splurging on designer handbags from Saks, weekend getaways to the Hamptons, and high-stakes poker nights at Atlantic City casinos. Without Emily's earnings to cover the mortgage, utilities, and groceries, their financial house of cards began to collapse. Months after Emily left, Ethan's phone call came late one night, his voice laced with desperation. "Emily, we're in trouble," he pleaded, the bravado gone. "The money's running out. We can't keep up. Please, come back." Emily, now settled in a sleek loft in Jersey City, couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. "You told me to disappear. Ethan, you and your mom called me a freeloader. What's changed?" His silence was telling. He'd finally realized the truth. Emily's income had been the glue holding their lives together. "You didn't know, did you?" she continued, her voice steady. "I was making $5,200 a month back then. Now, I'm clearing $7. And I don't have you two draining me anymore." Ethan's shock was palpable, even through the phone. $5,200? More than me? He stammered. Emily didn't bother softening the blow. "Maybe it's time you and Margaret learn to live within your means." "Good luck." She hung up, blocked his number, and cancelled her old phone plan the next day. Margaret's inheritance, a hefty $120 from her late husband George's estate, should have been a lifeline. Instead, it became kindling for her reckless spending. In just 4 months, she burned through nearly all of it, $30 on a luxury cruise to the Caribbean, $20 on a new wardrobe, and $40 lost in a blur of slot machines and blackjack tables. "It's my money," she'd told Ethan when he questioned her, waving off his concerns with a glass of Pinot Grigio in hand. "I deserve to live a little." But by the time the money was gone, The Harpers were drowning in debt. The mortgage payments on their Maplewood home, once covered by Emily's income, went unpaid. Utility bills piled up. Creditors called relentlessly. A year after Emily's departure, Emily drove past the old house on a whim, only to find an empty lot where the Colonial once stood. The "for sale" sign was long gone, replaced by a barren patch of dirt. Word around town was the bank had foreclosed, and Ethan and Margaret had moved to a cramped apartment in Newark. Their pride as broken as their finances. Meanwhile, Emily's life was a revelation. Free from the Harper household's demands, she thrived in her Jersey City loft, where floor-to-ceiling windows let in light and possibility. Her freelance graphic design business flourished, her client list growing as her reputation for sleek, innovative designs spread. She'd learned to manage her time like a pro during those grueling years with the Harpers, and now, with no one to interrupt her focus, her income soared. She treated herself to small luxuries, a pour-over coffee maker, a weekend yoga retreat in the Catskills, but mostly, she relished the peace of living on her own terms. It was at a wine tasting class in Manhattan, a hobby she'd picked up to celebrate her newfound freedom, that Emily met Daniel Carter. At 31, Daniel was the COO of a tech startup, a man whose quiet confidence and genuine curiosity stood in stark contrast to Ethan's performative charm. He listened when Emily spoke about her work, asked thoughtful questions about her designs, and never once dismissed her career as just clicking around. Their first date stretched into hours at a cozy Soho bistro, and within a year, they were engaged. Daniel respected Emily's ambition, encouraging her to take on bigger projects while building a life together filled with mutual respect. Their wedding, a small affair in a vineyard upstate, felt like a promise to herself, a vow to never again let anyone diminish her worth. The heart of Emily's story lay in the legacy of George, her late father-in-law. His will, which left Emily half his cash savings, wasn't just a financial gift, it was a carefully crafted escape plan. George had seen the toll his wife and son's selfishness took on Emily. In private conversations, whispered during late-night caregiving sessions, he'd promised her a way out. "You deserve better," he'd said, his voice frail but fierce. The will was his final act of gratitude, worded to make Margaret and Ethan believe Emily's departure was their idea. It worked. Margaret, misinterpreting the will as a dismissal of Emily's role, gleefully pushed her out, unaware she was cutting off the family's lifeline. Ethan, too spineless to object, followed his mother's lead. George's plan gave Emily the freedom she'd craved, and she carried his kindness with her like a talisman. As Emily stood in her loft, sipping wine with Daniel and planning their next adventure, a trip to Napa Valley, she felt a quiet gratitude for George. The Harpers' downfall wasn't her revenge, it was the natural consequence of their recklessness. But her happiness? That was George's gift, a poetic justice for the years she'd endured. Emily's life was no longer defined by the Harpers' chaos. It was hers, vibrant, full, and free.